Prosecutor.
And you and I on your show both predicted that we thought that she would be acquitted.
Again, lone voices
lone
in the
voices
wilderness.
in the wilderness.
In this situation, I think the same. I think that I don't know if you start imposing the death penalty on every run-of-the-mill domestic violence homicide, the death chambers of America would be 10 times more stuffed than they are.
I can't tell you the number of judges who say to me, you know, they'll see you do a show or a comment on something and then say, I don't understand why these cases in these other jurisdictions get charged as death penalty, because we have this kind of stuff going through our courtrooms and it's routinely pled or at least filed as a first degree and then pled down to a manslaughter or a second degree, most of the times a second degree murder.
Good evening, Arizona. I'm Patty Kirkpatrick. Whatever you believe, there is no doubt this trial is a blockbuster. The media attention has been immense and intense. Crystal Cruz was in the courtroom today with dozens of other journalists. Crystal?
That's right, Patty. All of these reporters and journalists had their notepads, cell phones out, listening closely to all of the information that's being passed around in court, and then, of course, turning around and sharing it with the rest of the country.
We've got to warn you, the way the defense attorney in her opening statement describes Jodi and Travis's alleged interactions, it's very graphic and very sexually explicit.
HLN's Jane Velez Mitchell was showcasing what could be the trial of the year on her show last night.
I can totally see her committing a murder.
Nancy Grace also weighing in on the 32-year-old accused murderer. National networks are parking their rigs outside of the courthouse in downtown Phoenix. Everyone's watching and waiting to see the drama unfold in the death penalty trial of Jodi Arias. Also in the courtroom were reporters and journalists from around the country. There were just a handful of seats left open in the courtroom to see what's now turning into a media circus. And of course, this trial is open to the public, but of course, seating is limited. Reporting live in downtown Phoenix, I'm Crystal Cruz for 3 TV.
You interview them, you ask questions, you do an assessment.
So when you are interviewing, you're not talking then, right?
Mr. Martinez,
yes or no? My question is, are you talking, yes or no?
Mr. Martinez, are you angry at me?
Ma'am, is that relevant to you? Is that important to you?
Ladies and gentlemen, please refrain from laughing in the courtroom.
Judge Sherry Stevens there responding to what happened when the prosecutor in the Jodi Arias murder trial went after a key defense witness who claims Arias is a victim of domestic abuse. Arias did admit to killing her ex-boyfriend, but says it was self-defense. The prosecutor has used this very aggressive style in the past. What kind of impact is all that having on the jury? Let's bring in Arthur Aidala, former prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, also a Fox News legal analyst. Tom Caniff, former prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, also with us. Arthur, it is not that often that you hear a courtroom break out into laughter during a murder trial like this.
Well, the spectators are probably, most of them are repeat people who have been there
over
and they've seen this, right? And this prosecutor has chosen to adopt this style of being confrontational. But you know, any style can get old, whether it's loud and screaming or low and quiet. So what I try to do is I alter it. I go back and forth. But he seems to be always like the race car in the red. And a witness finally called him out. Like, why are you yelling at me? Like, are you mad at me? And prosecution 101 is you're never supposed to get that personal with the witness. You're supposed to be just bringing out the facts.
Does it say to you, Tom, that the judge has lost control of this courtroom or the prosecutor has lost control of his presentation? Both? Neither?
I think both, but here's the rub. You know, the jurors are not going to like this stuff. As the prosecutor, it's your trial. No defendant ever raises their hand and says, hey, you know, can you indict me on first-degree murder and try me in my own death penalty case? The prosecutor brought these charges. The prosecutor is, in essence, in charge of the trial, in charge of the courtroom. Jurors want him to wield that power benevolently, if you will, or certainly not start badgering a domestic violence
so you think
expert witness.
You think this is bad for the prosecution? What happened?
It's terrible for the prosecution because he looks like a bully. He looks like a batterer himself.
That's the perfect word.
Right. She's not the defendant. It's one thing if you want to pick on Jodi Arias because she's a reputed murderer. Jurors may not like her to begin with. This is an expert witness.
This is a professional, a fellow professional, a doctor. You are supposed to give some professional courtesies, not be screaming and yelling at someone. And she's a professional on domestic violence, and he's screaming at a woman. A man is screaming at a woman like a nut job in the middle of a courtroom. It's probably not a good move.
Alice,
the evidence is so overwhelming, John.
Alice LaViolette is her name. She's, a sort of a professional witness in cases about domestic violence and battering. He went after her in part because she had apparently given, here's what he said. He noted that she had given presentations about, was Snow White a battered woman? Now, bringing Snow White into a case like this, I think he's trying to sort of impugn her credentials by saying, this is a woman who talks about cartoon characters.
Right. And there's a way to do that. You be pithy, you be a little sarcastic, and then you shut up and sit down. The whole thing with the Snow White, here's what goes on. Lecturers, experts, when they're trying to establish their professional credentials, they have to publish and they have to lecture. If you put out a lecture that says, the emotional effect of domestic violence on women defendants, you're guaranteed to have maybe 3 people in the audience. Right. You throw Snow White in the title, and all of a sudden you get people's attention.
John, I just
it's
went
marketing,
to a lecture.
it's branding.
He's so right on the mark. I just went to a lecture on criminal defense, a top judge, and it was all about My Cousin Vinny, the movie, and how excellent really the aspects of his cross-examination are, and how you could learn from it. So Tom's right. It's just to attract an audience.
The defense wants this jury sequestered. The judge, I guess, said no. Is that a mistake at this point?
In a Capital One case, I would err on the side of caution. If you get a verdict, either way, you want to make sure it's the right verdict and it's not influenced by Fox News, by the newspapers, by Us Magazine. So why not? I mean, yes, it's going to cost the government more money. The trial's been going on for months.
The appeals will cost the government more money.
First of all, what did you think of Juan Martinez's remarks?
I mean, well, first of all, it's just undignified for a prosecutor, I think, to be grandstanding, especially in a case like this, where whether or not you think that Jodi Arias is guilty of this crime, it's still a very serious and, event that should be in which prosecutors and defense attorneys should be behaving themselves in a more dignified way than it seems that Mr. Martinez was.
Okay, and you mean outside of the courthouse?
Both, even his demeanor in front of the judge and his lack of any sort of remorse, really, for having behaved in what is still inappropriate and undignified manner, to me, it says a lot about him.
Surrounded by a throng of admirers as he makes his way out of court. People calling his name, clamoring for a picture. A moment with the hard-hitting prosecutor in the Jodi Arias trial.
I want you to sign my name.
Really?
I do.
Oh, my God.
Here, I have my Sharpie.
Oh, Martinez, a 25-year veteran with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, has had his share of high-profile cases, but he says nothing could have prepared him for this.
This morning when we got here, we got to the elevator, and he was standing right there, and I was just kind of like shocked, and he just looked at me and said hi, and I was like, hi, it's so nice to meet you.
Juan Martinez is my hero. I call him my little firecracker.
Kathy Brown got to meet her hero for the first time on Valentine's Day.
I have to admit, he's very mesmerizing.
The jury is sacred. It is so important that they remain fair and impartial. It is what any defendant is entitled to, as a fair and impartial jury. And when a prosecutor or a defense attorney is grandstanding right outside of the courtroom and courting the public, and in fact getting such adoration as you say, there becomes a significant risk that the jury is now becoming biased, that they are now sort of, even if it's in an imperceptible way, even an unconscious way to themselves, they are starting to see that there's a hero in the story who might be Juan Martinez, who's signing autographs and posing for pictures, and there's a villain to the story who might be the defense attorneys and, of course, Jodi Arias herself.
I have my own judge to ring in here. Marcia Clark, the lead prosecutor in the O.J. Simpson trial.
I will take the other side of the truth. And I don't want to get too heavy-handed about this. I want to be fair. The truth of the matter is, what I don't like in a judge is when they don't really give consistent rulings on the objections. They have to control the flow of evidence. That's their job. And they're not there to just let a lawyer take the reins and run with it and let somebody stay on the stand for 8 days, repeating minutia and doing what we call cumulative questioning, which is over and over again the same points and the same ideas. You know, enough already. And it's up to the judge to control what the jury gets so that the jury does not get overwhelmed with a lot of nonsense or a lot of too much detail that doesn't help them decide the case. I want to compare and contrast this judge to the one in Casey Anthony. Judge Perry was amazing. That was the perfect jurist. That was a judge who controlled his courtroom, kept the lawyers in check, knew how to keep control of all of the rulings, knew how to control the flow of evidence, and never wavered, and he was consistent. This judge, on the other hand, you hear objection, and she says rephrase, rephrase, and rephrase. Okay, no, I don't want to rephrase. I want to ask that question. And a judge, if you think that question is not appropriate, sustain the objection. So what my problem is that this kind of the 8 days of direct went on. That did not have to happen, and it shouldn't have happened. There was a lot that I saw that was actually done repeatedly, and then some of the rulings that were completely didn't make sense from a legal standpoint.
Darren is objecting, but I'm going to. Go ahead.
No, do I get my momentum cut off? Well, the number one.
Well, you get 20 seconds of it. Go.
Okay. So you never want to have to do a trial twice. That's the number one rule for being a judge and for being a prosecutor. You don't want to have to relive this, and it risks having this brought back on appeal when you start cutting off the lawyers, just like Drew wants to cut me off now.
Such a high-profile case such as this, jury misconduct is always a concern. Social media, print media, even television can sometimes influence a juror. Arizona does not sequester juries generally, house them at a hotel, or keep them essentially in a bubble. And today I asked County Attorney Bill Montgomery if the jury in the Arias trial should have been sequestered.
I'm starting to become very concerned that the media circus here is going to create an appellate issue, where they can say that at some point, because the jury isn't sequestered, that there's no way but that they could have been affected at some point. And that's a big concern that I have.
Do you think the jury needs to be sequestered?
I think if the court had any sense that we would be where we are now, that would have been seriously considered.
Arizona hasn't sequestered a jury in a very long time. Montgomery believes one of the reasons for that is because it's very hard on the members of the jury, and it would be difficult for them to concentrate on the trial when you essentially cut them off from their everyday lives.